TOA community. Welcome back, everybody. Robert Linkul, trainingtheolderadult.com. This is Wednesdays with Robert, episode number 18. Excited to talk to you today about the body, medical conditions, and some pretty cool, pretty epic surgeries and some really neat visuals that are going to show you some of these surgeries. I want to comment on them as we go through, but these are brought to you today by Dr. Cory, MD. And I'm going to show you his Instagram page here. Now you're going to see, let me see if I can get that to focus a little bit better. You're going to see, come on, there he is. So everybody go check him out. Great dude. He's responded to me a couple of times and he's got some awesome posts. I mean, his stuff goes into great detail. Anyway, you'll see it in, in focus and in greater detail here in just a moment. But what I love, number one, is he's a fit doctor and he's all about fitness, and he shows a lot of strategies and application to age well with using resistance training and keeping your body fit. So number one, that's the first thing that I really liked about him. But number two, there's an education behind him that leads people to understand that there's life after surgery and that you can drastically improve your quality of life by utilizing some of these surgical procedures, but then getting yourself back into shape to be able to live this higher quality of life. So I'm going to show you a couple of those. We're going to dive in right away with the hip. And just a reminder here, we are, 9 days out from our TOA live in-house workshop. We do have 9 in-person spots remaining. Remember, we had 30 total. So 9 days out, 9 spots remaining. All of our Angle 90 handles have already been given out. Those went to the first 10. Anybody who wants to join online, you can watch, and it's recorded. You can watch anytime you want. People that come in person, you get the recording as well. But the in-persons, you all get to the hands-on. We get breakfast, you get lunch, you get a T-shirt, all kinds of door prizes and giveaways, all the great things that our sponsors are giving out. So, and CEUs and personal interaction. So if you're able to come and join us, please do. All right, we are going to start here with this first little one. I really like this video. This is from back pain. Back pain tip. This is from their Instagram page. I wanted to start with this just because I like this visual. It's really good at showing you the ball and socket. So this is the femoral head on the right. Let me see if I can get my mouse. This is the femoral head here, right? This is the acetabular socket. So when you say this is a ball and socket joint, this is what we're talking about. Here's the ball, here's the socket. Now, what starts to happen with the hip is if you have, I guess I would say, irregular movement patterns or in muscular imbalances that make your body move or manipulate in different ways, there's certain parts of the bony stature of the femoral head and the head of the femur that will start to hit that top part of the acetabular socket, okay? So basically, these will become, they're called bone spurs or impingements, and there's a cam or a pincer or both, and basically where's the bone? If you bang bone on bone, just like your hands, when you grip things, you'll build calluses, right? See my calluses on my hands from lifting? The body's response to this imposed demand is to specifically adapt by creating more skin to assist that area because it's placed under this stressor over and over and over again. That's the SAID principle, specific adaptation to an imposed demand. Well, the rest of the body responds the same way. So if I continue to move due to poor movement patterns or imbalances of musculature or just deformity of my body, not deformity like anything overly serious, but just some bodies are built different than others. If I move a certain way and the head of the femur bangs into the ASIS or the ASSI, depending on your flexibilities and such, and the bones start to hit each other, the bone will go, this is bone on bone, you keep hitting, we're causing damage, let's send more bone there to help padding, the impact. And by doing that, it basically creates a little deposit of bone, and that starts to pile up. And next thing you know, the spacing that you have in there is not so wide anymore. It's actually smaller and a little smaller and a little smaller. And depending on which side, a pincer or a cam, whichever one it is, they start to restrict the range and increase pain in doing so. So this is a really good visual to kind of show you like what a healthy hip socket should look like. It should move around like this guy right here, like this should just kind of circumduct and move in that area just fine. Then we add the labrum, and the labrum is kind of the best way that I can describe it to you is a clam out of the ocean, right? Like mussels out of the ocean. When they're sealed up, they're tight. And then when you stick your little fork or whatever in there and you pry it open, once that's like ripped open, you can't put it back together again and it's fine. The ripping is done. You've destroyed it. You've killed it, right? The same thing here. Your arthritic hip, where the bone starts to degenerate and it gets really porous. I'll show you some videos of that in a moment. And that porous, like dry, spongy component starts to scrape back and forth like a cheese grater and starts to wear away all of that white, spongy looking stuff that the labrum kind of holds this femoral head into that acetabular socket. It starts to like cheese grate it away. And eventually it starts to loosen it up. And eventually, if it keeps doing this over years and years, it's basically all chewed up and gone, right? So you just don't have a labrum anymore. So you're just bone on bone. So it's like a meniscus for the knee in a way where there's padding components, but it's also holding this joint together and helping it manipulate. So if you do damage to this through excessive range or overload or improper movements, or if you start to develop arthritis, we have issues. And then over the labrum are all the smaller musculatures that all work into this joint that help it move around. So your glutes, your glenoid muscles, all your hip flexors, etc. Okay. So this gives you like a really good insight. I love seeing this, a very good teaching tool. Now, Dr. Cory's going to come on.
Move the damaged piece inside the bone, and you put a metal rod. Check this out. Remove the damaged bone. So this is the top of the femur, and you put a metal rod, check this out, down the center of the bone and a ceramic head bowl on top. And then on the cup side, you machine the bone and you put a metal piece inside the bone in a plastic liner. When you put it all back together, is you have a ball and a socket. But the good news is there's no bone on bone.
Okay, so the beauty of this is he's showing in greater detail what's going on. Let me grab mine over here. He's showing in greater detail what's going on with a hip replacement. And basically, you have the stem, right, that's going to go down into the femur. And then you have the ball that's going to go on top of that. And then this guy's going to sit inside a fake acetabular socket that they're going to drill in. Now, I have a matching set of these in my hips. One that had poor cup placement, and it continued to dislocate over and over again. So they had to redo basically a full revision of my left hip and give me a better hip placement, a cup placement for my left hip, so it wouldn't dislocate. But this was a really good visual. You could see all the pieces he's putting together. The really interesting part, what they used to do, okay, is with the femoral head. Let me see if I can get back to that first part. My editing on here is not the greatest in moment. Okay, right here, this first little section that he has.
A ball and a socket. But the good news is
this first little section, there is they used to cut off the top of the femoral head, like inches worth of it, and leave that metal stem like sticking up. Like back in the old days, this is what it would look like. This would be your femur. They would cut off the top of it, right? And the stem would stick up like this. And then after time, they went, okay, if we have to redo these, right? If somebody needs a new hip replacement, we've got to go in and cut this whole thing out, take away another 4 or 5 inches of bone. So now you're halfway down their leg, right? And it was just a mess. So the next step in this was, let's not cut off the femoral head. Let's just cut off the ball, basically, and machine out a position where this guy can drop all the way down into it. And now we just put on a fake femoral head, right? So that's all that really needs to be replaced now. This guy can just stay for as long as the equipment is good. Now, after 20 years of wear and tear and using, ideally this ball, which is however big, whatever the size is, I don't know what they measure them. Let's just say it's an inch of plastic, right? After 20 years, it's a half an inch of plastic. Like the plastic on plastic rubbing has worn away and you need a new hip, okay? Because it's starting to get caught and stuck again. So they can open you up now, pop this guy off, pop out the cap of the acetabular socket, put in a new cap, put in a new ball, pop it back together, you're good to go. This like 8-hour hip replacement procedure can now be revamped or revised after 15 or 20 years in a much shorter window. I don't want to give an exact number, but way shorter than the original one. And they can go through the exact same incision if you want to, if you need to. So they can put these guys in there, leaving all the metal pieces. Nothing has to be cut out anymore, again, as long as all the metal and the materials are all still good. For some people, after years and years, or if you wear through the plastic so much that the metal eventually impacts the metal on the other side, then too much damage is done. Basically means you're not paying attention to your body and what kind of pains you're feeling while you're going through your life. You get to a point where the hips aren't working as well, or the joint replacement isn't working as well as it used to. That's when you need to go see your doctor and say, hey, something's up. I need to get on the books. Maybe I need a revision or an update or a replacement or et cetera. Okay. So really cool. They're short, simple little clips, but he gives such good visuals. All right, here we go.
Top. And then on the cup side, you machine the bone and you put a metal piece inside the bone in a plastic.
They've got this little, it's like a cheese grater golf ball on a drill, and they put it right up to the acetabular socket, and it starts to spin. So imagine a golf ball hooked to a drill, but on one side it's all serrated. And then they just take it into the acetabular socket and they smooth it all out, and it's scanned to fit exactly your hip socket. And all the little pieces, the stem, the ball, all of it, they're all as close to being matched to you as they can. If not, in his practice, they're perfectly, done. But these are, $50,000 hip replacements versus my $20,000 hip replacements or whatever it is, right? I don't know the numbers behind it, but it gives you a little more detail on how they do this and how it fits so well and works so efficiently.
Plastic liner. When you put it all back together, is you have a ball and a socket. But the good news is there's no bone on bone. You remove the damage.
Okay, now this is pretty cool. This is just showing, this is from his page a long time ago. I want to say this is a few years ago. This is a broken femoral head. And instead of doing a hip replacement on this individual, my dad had this done on both hips. They either crack or break the femoral head. They just drill in and put, 3 or 4 screws in there, and that's going to hold that whole thing together. And then usually they'll do one more that's vertical that goes from the top down. So you have like a cross of 2 joints, of 2 screws. My dad had 2 pins going in and 1 going down from the top on both of his hips. So not really a hip replacement, but almost like like a revamp, like he had to get what do they do? Like a tune-up, right, of the hip. So they just kind of re-support it and embrace it. Really cool technique of how efficiently they can do this with just a couple of incisions, pretty minimally invasive. All right, he's going to dive into, I think, disc replacement here on the next one. We'll get into that. That's so neat. And they just use like regular, like DeWalt drills.
Anytime that you have complaints of both knees, both elbows, both wrists, both joints that are symmetric on both sides, you need to be thinking about inflammatory conditions like rheumatoid arthritis. There are actually hundreds of inflammatory conditions, but anytime you have symmetric joint complaints, so both elbows, both wrists, both knees, you need to be thinking about inflammation. Anytime that...
Did you know that there are over 200 different types of arthritis? That's just crazy to me to think about it. I mean, there's regular arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis. I'm assuming those are kind of the big 3, and then there are many sub-versions of that, I mean, I'm kind of half kidding, but I think it all kind of stems down from those as being like the biggest ones. But what he's talking about here is, I think there was a 60 or 65%, don't quote me exactly on the number, 60 to 65% of those that had a surgical procedure done on whatever part of their body. The opposite mirrored side of that, 60 to 65% of the time, had to have the same procedure done at some point during their lifetime. So if you had a hip replacement on your right hip when you were 60, by the time you're 70, you had to have your left hip done. If you had carpal tunnel release on your right hand at some point in your life, 60 to 65% of the time, the left one had to be done, something along those lines. So what he's talking about is if you have pain in both sides at the same time, that's fairly rare. That means you have that you are a high risk candidate or highly likely an individual to say you've got a variation or a form of arthritis, and that's what is affecting both as opposed to I tore a ligament in both of my elbows and that's why they hurt, right? Now, that's completely possible if you fell and had to throw both arms down on the ground, or you had to grab something and pull it at a weird angle but you felt both elbows pop. Like, that's different, as opposed to, well, just over the years, both of my elbows have started to hurt, and they're both pretty severe, and they both are rather aggravated on a regular basis. Probably you have arthritis in there, and that's why they're both aggravated. Where if it was just one, right, then you could say, well, I could have arthritis, or maybe I injured myself and we have some kind of damage there. I loved all the little visuals above him there too. Again, my ability to go back and look at some of these is not great. Oops, now I've jumped too far ahead. Let's go back and see if I can't find the arthritis. Yeah, here we go. So look at these. Some of these guys are just really, really neat.
Both joints that are symmetric on both sides, you need to be thinking about inflammatory conditions like
Yeah, look at these little guys.
rheumatoid arthritis.
Those ones.
There are actually hundreds of inflammatory conditions, but anytime you have symmetric joint complaints, so both elbows, both wrists, both knees, you need to be thinking about inflammation.
Look at all that stuff. Okay. So look at the breakdown of all this. I'm not my area of expertise, but I love all the little, the little aids that come in overhead to try to help teach you. I want to find where he uses all this, because he can't just do all of this for social media for a 30-second clip. Like, he's got to be teaching this stuff somewhere else in greater detail, and these are the smaller pieces. I can't find it, though. I don't know what it is. If anybody knows that, if you find more of what he teaches and how he teaches in a longer form, please let me know, because I would like to do that. Okay, we're getting into, I think, the knee next. Look at this one.
Anytime that you have a reconstruction is where we take another ligament and we actually rebuild the ACL. Here you see a bone patellar tendon bone graft. We actually harvest the patient's own portion of the patella, the tendon, and part of the tibia, and then use that to reconstruct the ACL. Other potential grafts for ACL reconstruction are grafts from cadaver, hamstring, Achilles. There's some options. A reconstruction, but anytime you have symmetric joint complaints, so both elbows, both wrists, both knees, you need to be thinking about inflammation. Anytime that you have a reconstruction.
Okay, so we're going to look at this here. The cool part about this, I have always wondered how, when someone's like, oh, they used a part of my patella, and you're like, well, how do they do that? How do they just cut a chunk out of it and not damage the patella? This visual shows you a really cool way how they do it. He takes this strip right out of the center, and then he sews it back together. So your 2-inch wide patella is now only 1.5 inches, right? As they took a 1/2 inch of it out. Now, not only did they take a piece of it, they take the bone from the top half and the bone from the bottom half and the tendon and ligament holding those together, right? The tendons holding those together on either end. So you can use that whole thing when you graft it back in for the ACL, why that works so efficiently. Super cool visual. Okay, here we go. I'm going to mute him, but go through this again. Yep, so this part right here where they go in, look at that. They take the chunk out, and then they just sew it back together again. So that was a big one for me. I was like, oh, that's how they do it. Same with the hamstring. They would take the tendon from the back of the hamstring. Usually the biceps femoris, I think, is the biggest one out of the 3 in the back. And they would take a part of that tendon. However, a lot of my clients that have had that done, their hamstring's super weak, like 20 to 30%. 2 individuals, 2 ladies that I work with in particular, both like skiers, tennis players, bikers, cyclists, had, I'd say, 30, maybe even 50% hamstring loss on that one side compared to the other. I think the patellar replacement like this is much more effective and efficient in terms of not leaving the individual with a fairly damaged or severely weakened joint on the other side, okay? So we just got that chunk, and he's going to show it to you here. They drill in 2 drill marks. Look at that. Look at that. Okay, so there's the bone at the top, bone at the bottom, patellar tendon all the way through it in the center. So now you've drilled the 2 holes. They're going to just feed that guy all the way in there. You already have bone connecting the tendon on either end. It's not like you have to sew it or anything in there. You just basically screw both of those in there, and the bones will start to graft into that chunk of bone. I mean, just genius, completely brilliant. It's so cool. I know for some of you are like, dude, this has been happening a long time. I just love seeing how it's done. I've always heard about this. It's just different to see the visual of it. I mean, that's cool. And then they just kind of feed it through with some fishing wire. They use a little pair of tweezers and a Q-tip, and they shove it in there with a couple drywall screws. We're good to go, baby.
In
Okay,
your
here's the
shoulder
next
and down your arm, made worse with any neck movement. For some younger patients, cervical disc replacement is a minimally invasive pain relief option. The metal and plastic replacement disc can be placed through a 1-inch neck incision and functions to preserve range of motion.
So this is disc replacement. Now, I had another one of these. I looked for it high and low. I couldn't find it, but it was for the lumbar. And it's the same image of these metal discs that they can put back in there that hold the spacing, if not the original spacing that you had. And then there are two like interwoven pieces of metal that kind of slide in. They turn it and it releases. And it creates this springy effect that is like now the cushioning of the disc in between the two vertebrae, the shocks for the tires, if you will. Because a lot of the attempts in the past to do disc replacement, I think, have failed because they don't provide the cushion and the support. It starts to flatten over time, and then you get all this nerve pain from either bone on bone or the nerve being pinched off and not being able to flow through like it normally would. So this seems to be a pretty efficient and effective way where this has been working pretty well. So they are able to hollow that out. That's a herniation right there, how it bulges out on the side like that, and it pushes on the nerve. Great visual of that. These two little metal chunks go in. They like bevel and drill those in, and they slide out a little piece of bone on each side so they fit. And then they slide that little metal chunk in between it, and then they're good to go. And now you have your ability to manipulate and move your neck around in all these different positions. I mean, just really cool stuff. I'm such a fan. Did we cover all of them here? Let me make sure I thought there was one more. Nope, that's it. All right. I thought that was so cool, just taking a look at some of those medical procedures. If you check his page, he's got a ton of great information from, I don't know, he had one on mosquitoes, he had one on blood work, he's got one on all these different surgical procedures, why they scrub up beforehand and what that's actually doing. I mean, he really gives you a cool insight to what it's like to be a surgeon, number one, and to do these surgeries. Even as one where he's talking about like the amount of stress put on him when he's working on a friend or a family member. He's like, man, it's like drastically harder for me to work on people that I know, because he's like, I really don't want to screw up, you know? I mean, it humanizes. I think that's a really cool takeaway from someone who's willing to share and show who they are and what they do professionally like this, at a level that's not just everything in my life is perfect. Here's my Instagram where everything's beautiful and wonderful and I'm amazing and I never screw up, to where you're like, well, here's some of the concerns I actually have as this professional. Here's the real life concerns. Here are things that can go wrong and maybe sometimes do go wrong, and like owning it. If you think about how many times, okay, I don't know the number. My doctor, I'll use the initials HH for my doctor because she's a total stud, and she did my hip replacements for me. Another doctor, we'll call him MM, and he did all my arthroscopies and my injections and all this stuff. The two of them were two of the most respected professionals in their field, like they're high-level professionals, and I had the opportunity to work with both of them. Now, both of my arthroscopies worked well. Half of the shots that he gave me didn't work at all. Is that his fault? That's just kind of par for the course. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. She's done thousands of hip replacements. Do they all dislocate? No, her dislocation rate was really, 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 really low. But it's not 100%, right? It's not 100% guaranteed not to dislocate. You're going to have dislocations. Like, things are going to happen. That you think of the number of procedures that these folks do, and to have, one or two out of every 100 that have some issues that have to come back for something else. I just luckily was one of those guys. It just happened to be the guy, right? But also I look at it and think, like, had the average individual, not that I'm above average, I mean, I'm different in that my musculature for my body was so weird, right? I don't think they took that into account when they did my hip replacements. I think the initial cup placement was actually probably fine for someone who had fairly even musculature. But remember, I was a hammer thrower and a discus thrower, and I had turned from right to left and hyper extended a little bit, if you will, my left hip, and internally rotated my right hip millions of times, literally hundreds of thousands, if not a million times. And that creates a muscular imbalance that's massive. When I'm standing, my hips are not perfectly straight and even. I have an imbalance in my musculature that makes them turn and sit crooked because of how much I've overdeveloped one and underdeveloped the other, but made it more hypermobile, right? But I want my hips to be straight, so I muscularly change them when I am aware and awake. But when you're knocked out, everything lays differently, right? So I think everything was kind of just normal and straight. They do the cup placement, and then when I wake up and I start to move my body into these weird positions that they're normally in due to this huge amount of muscular imbalance, right? Just from millions of reps. I couldn't tell you from 5th grade until 25 plus years of rotating and throwing in one direction, I had to have had at least 1 million, if not more, rotations and reps in that direction. Now you add load to it, it's even more, etc. Okay? So add all that together for me to understand why that cup placement didn't fit right and didn't work. Totally understandable. Zero issues with the fact that that happened. It sucked. It was not cool dislocating my hip and having to get shot up with drugs and an ambulance ride and getting knocked out over and over again so they could try to redo it. And as soon as I got up, it popped out again. It did not feel good. It hurt like an MF. Like, it was not a comfortable experience for me, but it was a learning experience. I learned a ton from that. I became more of an expert on this because of that experience. And I have a greater understanding when I talk to other people about what they're going to go through and what could happen, because it did happen, right? So life is not happening to me, it's happening for me. That's my Tony Robbins line that I love. And I take in everything that happens in my life, good, bad, or otherwise. Life is not happening to me. It's not a victim mentality. It's happening for me. It's an educational learning opportunity for me to take this and learn from it. And how can I reapply it to make people around me better? My purpose here on earth, my dharma, my purpose is to teach, is to educate, to help other people get through these physical limitations, to overcome sarcopenia, to improve their quality of life. If you're listening to me, you either need my services or you're trying to produce services similar to it, right? You either need help or you're trying to provide that help and you need to learn how to do it. Those are the two people that listen to me. And in either way, I'm trying to relay that information to you the best I can. Having had the experiences, it's way easier for me to talk about it. It's way easier for me to share it. I have not had a knee replacement, but I've had multiple clients go through that. I was there for the surgeries. I was there in the rehab. I was there in the room after the surgery to see how miserable they were. And then the next day, how happy they were that it was now over the pain threshold. And I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I see that this was a valuable thing to do. There's a lot that comes of these experiences, right? There's a lot there. And it's just the mindset that we bring in here. Cory does an awesome job of showcasing a lot of this, but also giving a real person, even in a way like a vulnerability of like, this is really who I am and what I'm feeling, but let me bring the education to you. I think that's why I connect to it, and I like his content so much. I look forward to every little video that he puts out, and I'm always learning something from that because I'm a visual learner as well. And he does a great job of explaining it, but also giving us some pretty amazing visuals. All right, gang, I hope you enjoyed this today. Comments, questions, feel free to hit me up in the comment section below. Please remember to like and subscribe, ring the bell so you don't miss any of our other content. Help us grow the page. We appreciate it as the sun rises on us here today. We bid you adieu. I hope you have a great day, a great week. Much love and appreciation. Until next time, continue to fight your good fight against sarcopenia. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.